请马上集合部队，带到上午的指定地点。没有站好队的，没有站到自己位置的演员们，回去。
In 1908, a 3-year-old boy became Emperor of China. The event is recreated for an epic film, The Last Emperor, directed by Bernardo Bertolucci.
Ok, facciamo una prova con Kotao? Con tutto?
Bernardo Bertolucci had come to the public's attention with the high-class eroticism of Last Tango in Paris in 1972. He was made by that film, and he went on to do other films until he came to The Last Emperor, which was a story of the boy, a child, Puyi, who inherited the throne. Soon afterwards, the Republicans took over, and then the Japanese took over and made him a puppet king. He ended up as a gardener, and Bertolucci was shooting this great epic story, which was a tremendous success. He won Oscar after Oscar. 9, I think it was.
Possiamo mettere una macchina sotto che fa un totale fisso visto dal bambino, proprio sotto qui, come visto dal bambino.
Alzandoci fino alla terrazza qua sotto.
Sì, in modo che dal centro non la vediamo.
How old is Puyi? Puyi is 4,000 years, like every Chinese. This is part of my fascination. The age of Chinese and the age of China. The whole story is based on the first memory of Puyi all his life, a 3-year-old boy who sees the grown-ups, the adult, kneeling in front of him. He was like condemned to be omnipotent, condemned by history. So he will be like a drug addict. His drug was power. In the end of his life, he doesn't need this power anymore.
Look here.
Bertolucci, somehow or other, had got permission to film inside the Forbidden City, the first film crew ever to be allowed to do that. It was an amazing place to film. The Chinese army provided the people, the army, and there were thousands of them. They kowtowed to the little boy. You know, one of the things that was interesting was lunch, to tell you the truth, because the Chinese army went over there and huddled around what he imagined were small rice bowls, and they had lunch there. The Brits, there's quite a big British presence in the crew, went to their tables there and got stuck into a proper beefy lunch. And the Italians had their tables over there with beautiful tablecloths and lovely wine and elegant food served, that sort of way. It was not beyond caricature, it was on the edge of caricature, but it was also accurate. That was going on.
UK and China had a less loving relationship than Italy and China. And after all, noodles were universal between the two of them, and Marco Polo had been there. And they had made a TV series with Italian-Chinese co-production miniseries of Marco Polo. And so they welcomed us and delivered us what was needed to make the film. They wanted us to tell that story, from emperor to citizen, from son of heaven, lord of 10,000 years, to a gardener. That's a pretty big journey, and to be happy as a gardener, happier as a gardener than you were as an emperor. They kept Puyi alive, re-educated him so that we could tell that story. And that's my supposition. There's nothing better that could show China, and especially Mao's China, than that story. Without China's army and without the opening of all these landmarks to us, it would have been impossible, but they let us there. You couldn't do that now.
When I went the first time to the Forbidden City, which was the main set of the movie, I was having a kind of overdose of faces. These faces of farmers, peasants coming from the countryside, invading the imperial palace, looking for the ghost of the emperor.
Cut! Very good.
Bene.
What is important is the difference between this animation of life and the absolutely still life within the red wall of the Forbidden City. This is the important thing, not to say the audience why are the students protesting, just to give these two emotions, the great, the life, the energy of the youngsters, and the world, the progress which is going on in one side. The other side, behind the vermilion walls, everything is like 400 years ago, still life, immobile. Nobody can change this. That looks like Wimbledon, but it's the Forbidden City. And this is maybe one of the most boring days of my shooting, because not only I'm not a tennis player, but I never watch tennis on TV, and I have a problem with tennis, which I should investigate better. But really, tennis, to me, is just something I can't do. Puyi is becoming a man. It's a very delicate moment, this one. He's becoming a grown-up and is fired from the Forbidden City. He's fired from the theater, the stage of his childhood. I think Puyi, while everybody else is desperate and crying and in panic, Puyi has a more complicated and kind of conflict. He always wanted to walk through that door. He always wanted to see what he used to call the city of sound. Now he's asked to leave. He is, of course, terrified. Even to leave the prison where you live for 18 years is terrifying. And terribly exciting.
It's very distinct, Bernardo's shooting style, and he's very poetic in the way he makes films and the way he is in life. You know, he's son of a poet, a great poet, Bernardo Bertolucci, and he grew up surrounded by poetry, and that's the way he sees life, in the way he communicates, and that's sort of in his cinema as well, which is distinctive, you know, and there are very few directors who are distinctive.
Look in my eyes, okay? Now look at my hand.
Bernardo, dagli la sinistra così puoi stare più vicino alla macchina.
Okay. Look at
And
my
to get
hand.
a director's style and what they're underneath the film, whatever the story is being pushed around, that's sort of very unusual directors. Very few people like that do that.
Okay, cut. At the end, cinema is always cinema verite. Doing a big fiction movies, at the end, it's always to put a camera on real people who, even under very elaborated costumes and in very sophisticated sets, still human being, and the time is working on them. And if we shoot for 1 minute, it's 1 minute less in their lives. Like Cocteau used to say, Le cinéma, c'est toujours la mort au travail. That at work.
When not inside the Forbidden City, The Last Emperor production shifts to the Beijing Film Studio. China's past has been reconstructed on the back lots.
Which at the time had mud floors in the stages, and we built from bricks, not from false materials. We'd like to build a wall, okay? They built a wall. In fact, it was very, Bernardo was amazed at what happened to his office, because they built an office block for all of us, and an office for him. It was going to duplicate some scenes we wanted to shoot there. Anyway, we shot and we left and go to the north. Then we came back. There were already about 100 people living in these sets, because they'd turned the sets into a house. Because everybody who worked at the studio lived at the studio, and it was, you know, a job that came with accommodation, and with a very different system than here.
A day like any day, a morning like any other morning, May 1919. We have been in the movie so far with Puyi in the Forbidden City. Suddenly, we are outside. China is a republic now. People are still very poor. A car arrives. In the car, we have this new character, Reginald Fleming Johnston, who is going to the Forbidden City.
Cut!
I wanted Johnston to be this, immediately, this strange creature, this extraterrestrial. When I look at Peter O'Toole, I think it's a very right choice. So tall and blonde, blue eyes, and everybody around is so different. One morning I was in Shanghai. I woke up very early. There were thousands of people in the streets, and I felt a kind of ecstasy of being the only foreign, the only different person in the street. There is something exhilarating, and I think it's what Johnston felt.
Peter O'Toole was playing the boy's tutor, the Emperor's tutor. He was, in his usual, very mischievous form. I think Peter O'Toole is one of those actors who quite soon got bored with acting. He worked out the part, he knew what he wanted to do, and in between takes, he just wanted to amuse himself. So he collared me at one stage and said, "When I say go, go. Just follow me, go." Because we were very restricted. Although we were in the Forbidden City, there were ropes and long things. We couldn't go down there, we couldn't go down there, we couldn't go down there, we couldn't go down there. And so, at a certain stage, O'Toole looked around and said, "Go." So I raced after him. We went down this little alley, round that alley, round. Very undistinguished alleys, but anyway, we shouldn't have been there. And we finally got to a window at the end of an alley, and he said, "There, in that room, that's the study. That's where I tutored him. That's the real place. We weren't allowed to use it. That's the real place. Come on, let's get back." And we went back. It was a heck of an experience. And I think we made a good film, and of course he made a good film also.
Vai sull'occhio, scusa. Invece che stai su... Ecco.
Finally, we are shooting the eyes of Puyi, but it makes me think that to a movie is always to peep through a hole with the camera, but camera in Italian means room. So room, which room? Maybe the bedroom of the parents, which Freud used to call the primal scene. So we are back to peeping through the door of the parents, making love, and from there you go to Michael Powell, peeping Tom.
78, take one.
Action, Constantine.
Look at my left ear, please, sir. And on my right ear. Thank you.
It was interesting to see that filmmaking style which I hadn't worked with before, which was very Italian, and the filmmaking should be really, really enjoyed. Not quite a party, but something that is enjoyable within the framework of the difficulty of what you're doing. Should be something where everybody's joined together, group of traveling players and technicians enjoying themselves. So that's a very nice way to work, and that's why we worked together for decades afterwards.
I think the movie will show that the Chinese are very special. In another country, the ex-emperor, who has been a collaborator with the Japanese, with the Nazi Japanese, he would have been probably condemned to death. The Chinese put him in prison for 9 years. They asked him to change. The movie is about a man who is changing, who is asked to change. They never ask him to be a communist. They just ask him to understand his mistakes. This prison is not what we are used to think and to know in the West, the place of the brainwashing. If you think that Puyi had his butler in prison for the first 5 years of his prison, because the Chinese thought that he couldn't, and it would have been too tough for him, so he would have refused this change. So there is a big conflict. There's a kind of dialectic. The governor says you have to change. Puyi thinks a man cannot change. He thinks he will spend all his life in prison.
You forgot my tooth powder. Oh, yes, sir.
Move it. What is interesting is when in 1959, after 9 years of prison, Puyi has the pardon. We don't know if he's changed or not. Even the governor of the prison doesn't know it. Then we follow a bit Puyi outside. He becomes a gardener, he's in the botanic garden. Is he changed? Yes, he's changed. But you know why he's changed? Because for the first time in his life, this man is free. He's free to go in the street, he's free to ride a bicycle, he's free to get to a bus, to take a bus, to go in the middle with other people.
Isn't there a slight risk that this interpretation of Puyi's life might be just a little bit of a fairy tale, that things come out so well for him and everybody's redeemed through re-education? Isn't the risk of it being a fairy tale ending?
I think Puyi is a bit Peter Pan. I mean, he's somebody who doesn't want to grow up, somebody who has a big problem to become an adult. And he will be an adult, a grow up, only when he will be an old man. No, I hope this risk is not there, just because the story of Puyi is a very exceptional story. The prison where Puyi was is a very special prison. And also what I think is important is the idea that Chinese justice has about, for example, the war criminal. What was important was not so much the punishment, but was important the re-education. This is in general in Chinese prison, even today, even if they are in prison sometimes for wrong reasons, or reasons that to us would look wrong. The idea of the Chinese justice is not purely punish these people, these eventual criminals, but to try to make them understand. And this is, I think, true, is not propaganda.
Show